Joe here, and got a fantastic episode of Real Talk to go through with you. So, look, I caught up with Ron Snow and Stephenie Gold. Ron is CEO, president of Gold Capital Partners, and Stephenie Flood is the COO at Remax Gold. Loved this conversation. Both Ron and Stephenie really bring some fantastic boots on the ground experience and perspective to the table. So it's really good digging in with them. They're on the ground, they're doing it every day. And we'll talk about a few key things. So we're going to talk about why this is a big meet the market moment, like big moves that are happening in the space. What does it mean? We get into what they recommend you start doing yesterday or today if you want to double your deals in 2026. We've seen a lot of teams and agents doing that as they went from 2024 to 2025. Not that the transactions are dramatically up, but just that their efficiency is up. And I think we'll see even more do it as we go into 26. So what do you got to do there? And on that note, what does the modern lead funnel really look like? What's going on with AI and innovation that drives that? And what are just some of the key fundamentals that you ought to do? How are agents and brokers facing the challenges they've got, and then driving that to kind of really power their funnel? So really great topics. Look forward to digging in with you.
Real Talk with Joe Skousen.
You know, the truth of real estate and how to kind of drive success and growth and those things in real estate is it's understanding kind of, we often refer to it as like that sacred relationship that's at the center of it all, the consumer and the agent relationship that's really at the center of it all. And how do you enhance that and drive success in that relationship that emanates out to basically the rest of the space, right? And so when you talk about starting from the ground up, bottom up versus top down, I think that's absolutely essential, especially at this moment when there is so much change. I mean, gosh, you look at the industry, there's a lot going on out there in the space, right?
It's so interesting because our industry has always been centered around change. Even if you speak with agents or brokers that have been in the industry for a very long time, they like to remember that they've always done it this way. But I will invite them to remember that when I started, we had an MLS book on the counter, and we were very excited when we had a Lightning MLS where you could go online to enter your listing. So change is part of our industry. It's not going away. But I know that it is scary at times, but change is really, I think, right now coming to our agents front and center because so many things are changing. It's not just the technology side. It's not just the buyer broker side that we've been dealing with for the past 14 months at this point. It's industry. It's at every level that we're seeing change. So I think there is a little more maybe than what we're used to in terms of change facing our agents, but also change is opportunity. It gives us this chance to jump on what's coming, and instead of being afraid of it, to kind of run into that change and adapt and give us a chance to be better and be better at what we do in working with the consumer every day.
Yeah, 100% agreed. I think it is, and it is a forcing function and a big opportunity, like you say, Stephenie. What are you seeing, Ron, on kind of the change front and impact with agents and teams?
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. I mean, I love change. Change is evolution. You have to stop looking at change as a negative or a bad word. We have to evolve.
Yeah.
And failure to evolve will eventually put you out of business, but it'll also eventually um, you won't be able to service your client as well as you could. And so what I like to look at when we look at change is just say, look, embrace it. You have to embrace the change. You have to, yeah, and I get it doesn't happen overnight, but it's step by step, little by little. We offer opportunities for people to embrace change on a weekly basis. There's trainings on a weekly basis because we understand that you don't go from A to Q. There's a whole lot of letters in between there that we
Yeah.
have to get there. So that's what I'm seeing is as long as the consumer is changing,
Yep.
we will be changing, and that the consumer needs drive everything that we do. And so if the consumer is looking for example, a one-stop shop or easy or simple or less face-to-face communication, more texting, then we've got to deliver it. And so, we have to deliver to the consumer where they are and what they want when they want it, or they will find somebody else to give it to them.
Well, I love that. And I agree 100%. The consumer needs have to drive it. And those consumer needs tie right to that center of the relationship there. Some interesting data points, right? When we talk about consumer needs and behaviors right now, and we talk about what's going on in the world and the size of this shift. So everybody is on social media. We know that now, right? 70%, this is actually a few weeks back, it's probably closer to about 80% now, of all of the images that show up on social media, which that's like a lot of the focus of social media, right? Is imagery and videos and things. It's now set between 70 and 80% of all of the images are AI generated, right? So it's the majority, the vast majority. When you think about that sheer amount of content that's being generated by AI, sometimes that scares the agents. They're like, okay, I can't even participate. Like I had a hard time participating before. I don't even know. And it's like they tend to maybe think, man, I gotta back away a little bit. But it's the opposite. It's like you really got to figure out how to lean in and get empowered by that change, right? And that's like one of the keys here, because as an agent, Stephenie, you mentioned this is a moment of enormous opportunity for them. So it's kind of like, how do you take advantage of that, right? That's what we're going to kind of get into today. So as we get into this, a couple of things we're going to try to tackle today. We're going to try to tackle, okay, what do you do with some of this change? How do you think about some of the change? We're going to tackle, look, we're heading towards 2026. This is a moment of opportunity. We're going to double the business. How do you double the business in 26? How do you double, if I'm a team, if I'm an agent, how do I double the business? And how do I make my experience with my consumers twice as good as it is today? Right? So we're going to go tackle that. And we're going to talk about some real kind of on the ground nuts and bolts. How do you think about a sales funnel in here today? So before we get there, can you guys take one more minute and tell us, Gold Nation's doing some interesting things. What are you guys up to right now? Like, what are you doing over there, Ron? What are you doing over there, Stephenie? Give us a little tidbit there.
Ron, I'd love for you to speak to Gold Capital Partners and some of the incredible things that we're doing there. I think that's huge, and agents want to hear about that.
Yeah, I'll happily jump in on that. So Joe, as you know, because you've had a peek behind the curtain for the past 6, 7 years. We built a one-stop shop ecosystem for our agents, for our real estate professionals, because it really now includes, it started with our agents and brokers, and now it includes our loan officers, our escrow officers, our insurance agents. But we understood 6, 7 years ago that the consumer was changing and that they were looking for that easy button and they were looking for that one-stop shop. And, everyone talked about it for 20 years. You've heard in the industry, the Holy Grail. We've built that ecosystem. We've deployed that ecosystem. We've been out running that ecosystem. And we have developed basically a world-class buying, selling, owning real estate professional ecosystem. The greatest thing is it's not just us. It's owned by our real estate professionals on the ground. We all own it together. We operate it together. And we're really out looking after the consumer first and delivering to them that world-class opportunity, world-class experience if they're buying, selling, or even owning a home.
This is kind of like what people have been wanting to do for a long time, right? It's kind of like this ecosystem of technology, real estate services and solutions. And you kind of think, when I think real estate, my real estate transaction, I'm thinking about the home for sure, but also the mortgage and the title and all of the things. And historically, it's been such a tough kind of consumer experience. But you guys have like really been streamlining that. And again, it's more successful for the consumer. It's way better for them. It's way better for the agent. It's way better for the team. I mean, it's really been phenomenal to kind of see you guys put this together over at Gold Nation. Stephenie, you guys have been kind of executing and driving that and seeing that now kind of applied across a bunch of markets.
It's been so much fun to watch that and to see the recognition kind of in the face of the agent or broker when they kind of understand what it is and how this actually helps. And so much of it is having the right people there to be able to execute on the story and be able to deliver because they understand. So having the correct loan officer in the market who understands this is the long game. We're going to be working together for many transactions to come. And the same thing with the insurance and title and escrow. Having those key people in those roles to be able to deliver on that commitment of service ultimately to the consumer, where the agent or the broker says, wow, okay, you were right. I can trust this. These are the right people to work with, and I can see how I'm going to get more business out of this because of how streamlined it is, how efficient it is, and how everybody has the same goal at the end of the day and is kind of putting their oar in the water at the same time to get to the goal of serving the consumer in repeat transactions. And what we're going to talk about, doing more business in 2026.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and as I've seen you guys and been able to kind of watch from afar a little bit, it's so aligning. Everybody's interests are completely aligned, which doesn't always happen in real estate. I mean, I don't know how long you guys have been here, but it doesn't always happen that everyone's interests are aligned. And so, from the consumer to the agent to the team to the broker to the, and so that's pretty impressive. Okay, so 2026, we're Q4 now. We're heading towards 2026. I don't know how often you guys hear it. We hear it all the time. Someone's like, I'm going to increase my business going into the next year, right? January tends to be a pretty optimistic time in real estate. So we're heading toward 2026. Do you wait towards spring of 2026 to make your plans? I mean, how does this look if I'm like, Stephenie, I want to double my business in 2026. What do you think if I'm coming to you saying that today?
I think, okay, let's go. Let's get started now because so much of what we do in our industry is going to lead to things down the road. Generally, it's not, I'm going to take an action today in preparation and I'm going to see a result tomorrow. So we have to plan ahead. We have to be thinking at least a quarter ahead, 2 quarters ahead with what we want our business to look like. And we're at the point where you should have your business plan just about ready to go, and then you're going to start executing on your business plan in November and December, because we also know that in November and December, a lot of people take time off. So if you're doing the work now to get ahead in November and December, that's the starting point to that 2026, to that doubling my business, having a better year, closing transactions in January and February when maybe other people aren't going to start closing transactions until the spring. Yeah. But you got to start the way I like to look at it. You should have started yesterday, but we'll start today because it's today.
Yeah. Yeah. If you could have planted the tree, you should have planted the tree 30 years ago. If not 30 years ago, today, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Ron, how you've worked with lots and lots of very successful agents and teams, and you kind of not only have been there, done that yourself, you're there with your folks every day. If Stephenie, to your point, someone's like, okay, I'm ready to start right now, building toward 2026. How do you think about doing that, getting started? So maybe they should have started yesterday, they're starting today. How do you get started? Like where does your head go, or where does your instruction go to somebody who's starting today? Where do they start? How do they get going in that?
Okay. Joe, if we're talking to somebody who's been successful in the business, so we're talking to a high producer.
Yeah.
It's really simple. I like to look at it and say, hey, 98% of what you're doing is correct. 98%. So I don't know if you've ever read anything or seen, we've done videos on what happens to water at 212 degrees.
Yep.
There's videos on 212. Well, normally we're off by 1 or 2 degrees. We're 210 degrees, but we're not boiling. Water at 212 creates steam, creates energy, creates movement. So what I like to do is start to break it down and say, let's keep this simple and not go in and rewrite everything that you're doing, but let's look for the 1 or 2 things that we can change. This aligns with much of my beliefs of Pareto's principle that 80%, that 20% of what you do will produce 80% of your results. And if you flip that around and you look at it in a market like we're in, it's really 10% of what you're going to do is going to present 90%. You got to get laser focused on what we need to be doing. So, the old adage of, hey, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I believe in that. I believe that you need to work with others in the profession. You need to be able to sit down with a leader who's been there, done it, is doing it, and say, okay, what are the one or two things we're going to work on? We're not going to change your entire thing. When it comes to adapting and integrating technologies, we're talking about one thing or two things. We're not talking about, hey, stop everything you're doing. We're talking about very simple things like, hey, let's get your database into a CRM. Period. One thing. So what we never want to do, and it's, we have extremely, across Gold Nation, extremely professional, high producing, successful real estate age professionals. We'll say real estate professionals across real estate, but also mortgage and title and insurance. And what we want to do is help them find those one or two things that are going to produce. Um, the beautiful part about it is when I sit with somebody, I'll probably give you 10 things to throw away
Yeah.
because I also believe if 20% of 20% of your efforts are going to produce 80% of the results, I believe that 80% of what you're doing is a waste of time.
Totally. Totally.
So
I
so
love that.
I'm gonna liberate you. I'm gonna actually do what people say, and I'm gonna help you find free time.
Yeah.
For every one thing I ask you to do, I promise there's gonna be two things I'm gonna tell you they're done. You're wasting your time on that.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at it.
I love that. I love Stephenie, the start yesterday. And if you can't start yesterday, start today. Right. And then Ron, I think your points about the 80/20 I love because I do think that's true. I think when you're dealing with someone who's been in the business for a while and who's done the stuff, they're doing a lot of good things. If they have a risk, it's that they've seen good results from an activity. And so they don't want to change anything about it. They're like, I have been sending these postcards by hand from my paper mailing list for so many years that it's working. It's like, great. But if you don't change anything, you are going to be limited. You're going to be capped, right? So you don't need to change everything. But the way I like to think about this is the funnel, what I like to call an empowered deal funnel. And Ron and Stephenie, interrupt me anywhere. But when I think about driving this, multiplying the results, I want to go do 2x. I want to go do 3x next year. Not just one more deal. I want to go actually like multiply my business a bit. I look at it as you got the capture. I got to capture people. I got to capture and bring them into my database. If I don't have them in my database, if I'm running in too many different places, first of all, I'm planning to fail, right? Because I got everything everywhere. Not only can AI not help me, there's a lot of stuff that can't help me. So it starts with the capture. I then have to turn that database into warm conversations. That's the second step of the funnel. And we'll talk about how we kind of do some of these things. But I got to go from the capture to the conversation. When I get to that conversation, I go to the commit. How do I actually turn that conversation into, hey, we're working together, we're moving forward? And I would say, Ron, to your point, often the agents and teams we run into, even the highly professionalized ones, they're pretty good at that conversation to commit step. They're pretty decent there. And then you go from the commit to the close. And I would say often they're the best at that actual jump in the funnel, but they actually fail right after the close that brings people back to the capture. But if you look at that, the capture, the conversation, the commit, the close, and you say, okay, how am I empowering that funnel? There's a lot of magic in that. So so that's the funnel. Let me show you a couple of things that we have seen over the last few years. First, part of the data that drives us is we've got 6 million leads a month coming in and 12 plus million a month active consumers on web and search that we see from a lot of the agents, teams, and brokerages that we've dealt with and worked with for many years. And so we've got a ton of data that tells us how this stuff flows through the funnel, when it's working best. And so those leads and contacts turn into 1.2 million conversations per month. That's a lot of conversations going on per month. So we see 1.2 million conversations per month. We see 1.1 million listings and almost a couple 100 million buyers in the database per month. So we see a lot of flow from the conversation over to the commit, and then we see a couple hundred or a couple million transactions flowing through our systems a year. And so when you look through this, we really have the chance to bring in a lot of data. Now, starting at the front of the funnel, guys, we can talk about some of the AI enablement, but let's talk the capture for a second. Ron, you brought this up a second ago, and Stephenie, I know you've talked about this too. What's the biggest failing that people have? So if they're going to double their business next year, where do they typically fail on the capture? Ron, what do you see?
We've had many conversations about this. We still have, and I mean, I hope nobody tars and feathers me for saying this, but we still have in the industry real estate professionals who are not answering their phone, who leads are coming in and they're not getting back to them. We just have it. I mean, it's everywhere. I get, we know about it because the complaint ends up back to us. And it's like, hey, yeah, no, it was one of your agents, and here's their name, and I was ready to buy, and they couldn't even call me back.
Yeah.
So I think it starts there with professionalism. I think it starts with the basics. Nothing, I mean, if I were to say, where does it really start, Joe? It starts with being just the basics. You, Bull Trail can deliver all the leads in the world. And we know that statistically, only 2 to 4% of them are actually going, even though they put their name in there and they put their phone number in there and they hit give me more information, 2 to 4% of them are going to actually admit that that was them who did it. and want to have that conversation. It might be a little bit high. You could adjust my stats. You're the expert, but as we look at that, it's still important that we start at the basics of being a great salesperson, of getting back to people. That'd be my opinion of where the breakdown starts. And the ones who've solved that, sometimes then we'll just say they get really, really busy all of a sudden.
They all of a sudden are like, whoa, there's a lot. And Stephenie, I've seen you like prompting and promoting and being like, guys, get your stuff started. What's been like one of the big focus areas you've been talking about lately?
So we've been focusing so much. We spent the last few months really sharing the value of the Bull Trail system. So Ron, you talk about getting back to people. Imagine if you uploaded your database and the system got back to those people for you. And then when you logged in each morning, it would tell you exactly who you need to call, and it would make it that easy.
Yeah.
I know that many of our agents use CRMs and they're working. And as long as you're getting back to the consumer and you're closing transactions, let that stay over there. But if you're not, and you have post-it notes all over the place, or a notebook, or somebody that you're going to try to remember to call, maybe it would be better to automate that so that we can work smarter, not harder, and be able to get back to more people more efficiently so that we can turn more of those from maybe 2 to 4% to slightly higher. For me as an agent, if I'm leveraging the Bull Trail system that's there and that's proven and that we know it works, I think leaning in is the best way to get started on getting more people into that funnel at the front end.
I love that. A couple of interesting facts exist, and what you guys are both pointing to is this: capturing your database and moving that to a conversation that you're engaged with is the number one gap. That is the number one. When you say what's stopping somebody from doubling, 2xing, 3xing their business next year, that is the number one gap. And a couple of interesting things. So if let's say I load a database of 1,000 adults in the US, right? How many of those people are going to transact on a home in the next 10 years? Humans, not talking about transacting with me. I'm saying, how many of those adult humans are going to transact on a home in the next 10 years? It's about 85% of those. Not every one of them. 85% of those will transact in the next 10 years. Sometimes what people get a little confused about is, Ron, you're totally right. It's going to be something like 2 to 5% of them are going to transact this year, right? This year. And if you run all the metrics, it may be slightly higher that will transact this year, right? But over the next 10 years, not all of them, but almost all of them will transact, right? That's like the thing that everybody misses. They're looking at like the near term. They're like, how many are going to transact this month? This thing's a disaster. This thing's a waste of time, right? The truth is, they're all going to transact basically over the next 10 years. And so, one of the things that we've really been working on is some of these tools like Home Search AI, where you come in, you load your database, and part of what the AI can start to do now is comb through that. As an agent, what I hate is I don't like combing through all the data and doing all the things. I want some tech to do some of this for me, right? But they often get stuck because they can't see that functioning before they get stuff in the database. And so, Stephenie, I love what you're talking about. You're like, hey, this is the basic of the basic of the basic. Load that thing in the system. When you do, you can actually flip on this AI now. And this home search AI, in addition to being kind of the most compelling home search experience out there, it actually will proactively comb through the database, find people who don't have a search alert set up, find people who maybe have a search alert set up, but it's not matching for them often enough. And it'll with AI proactively change that for them. And it is multiplying the conversations out there. That it's game changing for them. So one of the things that we've seen over the last little while is, Ron, I think I told you this when we were starting to do the home search AI stuff. I was like, hey, I think this is going to be pretty meaningful, right? I was like, I think it's gonna drive some change. Early results are 40x the engagement. So if I'm an agent and I load my database up and I get home search AI going for me, 40 times the conversations that I was having before start to come out of my database. Can you believe that?
That right there is a big part of how you're going to double your business in 2026 is by leaning in and using that. And that tool is so fantastic too, having seen it a little bit and played with it a little bit. It does really incredible things, and it takes you back to smarter, not harder, more efficient, and leaning into the tech that's there, that's ahead of so much other tech that's out there too.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, Joe, I've got pet peeves, and so I'm going to throw one out. You can edit it out if you need to, but one of the pet peeves I have is when we go out and we teach this and we work with professionals on this, and they say, "No, I'm going to respond to everything myself." And I've been looking back at them and saying, "That's great. Your competitor's AI bot is going to respond at 12:30 tomorrow night or 12:30 in the morning tomorrow for them, and they're going to keep that conversation going while you're sleeping." And I hate saying it because for many, many, many years, we did teach get face to face, belly to belly, eye to eye, get it, build those relationships. Well, the consumer has changed. And the consumer wants to text at 2 in the morning or start a search at 4 in the morning when you're sleeping. And they want an answer in 5 minutes or 1 second. And so I love what you've built and what your team has been working on, because it takes that demographic that immediately wants a response, and it starts to give them a response on my behalf.
100%. I love that. And you've said it. I actually heard you say this earlier, that it's not that agents are being replaced by AI, right? But agents that use AI will replace those who don't, right? And the truth is, the belly to belly and face to face relationship is at least as important as it's ever been. Some of the strongest consumer trends actually point to this concierge economy, where people really love this high touch, personalized approach to service. Your consumers love that as much as they ever have. They're leaning into it. They actually spend more money on concierge powered experiences than ever before. So this high touch experience is important, but that doesn't mean you don't use AI. It's actually more important to use it, right? Because if you're a human and today you have to spend 80% of your time doing these rote activities to go drive to the high touch experience, now you get to spend all your time on the high touch experience, right? Or nearly all your time. And so it's very valuable. The other dynamic that's interesting is we were looking at a stat the other day. We're starting to get more and more data from kind of AI implementations. Did you guys realize 4 out of 5 people now prefer to talk to an AI before they talk to a human? They actually prefer the AI experience first. And often it's because they're like, I want to just get a little information going. I want that first before I have this human breathing down my neck, or worse, breathing on my face and smelling the onions from their lunch. Like let's get to know each other first. And so 4 out of 5 would actually prefer to have that AI powered experience first. So that's kind of like gap number one, is the capture to the conversation. And then Ron, you kind of talked about this a minute ago, where you were talking about what I would call the conversation to the commit. It's almost like the conversation starts. They reply to an email. They call. What do you see? I mean, and is this only the newest agents that run into this? What have you seen, Ron, on that front?
No, I
Who
think
drops the ball on the conversation, and how often?
yeah, I would say that we're really, really good once we've had a conversation, and we've started that interaction and that back and forth. I would say that the ball gets picked up right there. Um, it's the gap you're talking about that we're all trying to solve is how do I use AI to get me to that first meaningful conversation and get through the five contacts I need to make because you come into the funnel as an inquiry, right? I mean, we won't even call it a lead. It's an inquiry. You come into that funnel. It's an inquiry. I gotta AI, as you're saying, I mean, AI is the key to just helping nurture those hundreds and hundreds of inquiries to get them to a conversation. Once that conversation happens, I agree with you, Joe. We're really good. And where we're great at Golden Nation is on that next phase that you talked about of consummating, putting the deal together, holding the deal together. What we're using is the ecosystem early on. We're touching them because we're finding that they want answers to their mortgage immediately. We're catching them early in that funnel and having mortgage conversations with them. Insurance for many of our areas is very difficult, and we're having that insurance conversation with them before we're even committing to go out and look at homes. We're finding that's what the consumer's worries are. So our ecosystem, the Gold Capital Partners that we put together to say, look, we're going to help solve this. I know, I know, any agent, any broker can go out and put a little team together to handle them. We're putting together literally the best in the country, the best in the nation, the best technology in the nation, the best lending and insurance in the nation to back it. To say no, we're gonna uncover this conversation. We're gonna have these conversations up front. The great part is the agent isn't the real estate agent or the real estate broker is not having that conversation. Their partner is.
I
And where
love
they're
that.
all partners, they own the ecosystem together. They have a trust factor that doesn't exist anywhere else, where they're literally saying, my partner, my business partner is an expert in mortgage. They're going to go through this with you, and we're going to attack this together.
I love that. So part of the way you guys are helping to drive and solve for maybe sometimes where conversations drop is if I'm a consumer coming in, I don't just have a home like set of questions. I might have a question about the mortgage or the title or the insurance. And part of what you guys are doing is bringing that ecosystem together so that I can work with basically a whole team of people there much more fluidly, much more seamlessly.
Yeah, and Joe, I'll just add one thing, and I'm not bad mouthing anyone else, but we're not sending you to a call center. We're sending to a local professional who lives in your area, that works in your area. We believe, our belief is very simple, that the local professionals, the real estate professionals, realtors, the loan officers, the escrow officers, they're all going to win together. They're all going to
Yeah.
work together, and they understand the market that they're in. We're not trying to run this out of a call center from, somewhere else. We're right there in every market, and that's part of the magic of how we're approaching this, to say, hey, we're going to solve this problem for you localized, because we understand local insurance needs right now in this area that happened to catch on fire 2 years ago, and it's really hard to get insurance in. But we've got the solutions. We've dialed up the solutions with our
Yeah.
insurance professionals.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Stephenie, what are you seeing on your side?
Well, I love that point, Ron, because, and then to tie it back, because these people actually answer their phones too. It goes to their local phone number, they answer their phones, and they're right there. And I think part of what, in having those conversations and changing those conversations, what we've seen over the last, since August 17th of 2024, when we had to kind of change the way those conversations are had with the consumer initially too, and be better prepared. We've spent the year prior to that and the 14 months since then having conversations about how to have a conversation with the consumer. So
Yeah.
really equipping our agents to be comfortable in what might be an uncomfortable conversation, where you're talking about the largest financial transaction of this person's life and you're talking about money that has to be paid out. But being able to equip our agents to be comfortable and have practiced and to be able to demonstrate their value to the consumer, so that that relationship is cemented at that point, so we get all the way through the funnel to the end.
You know what I love about what you guys are talking about there is what you guys are describing, both of you are describing, is how the quality of that conversation, that interaction, that human, this is something, part of what you guys are describing is something AI can't do, right? It can't do it the same way. And so you have to be in that moment of having the conversation. What AI can do and should do is comb through that database and engage those people. And it can do it with stuff like home search AI, like we were talking about. We have the AI concierge solution. So it's actually, not only is it nurturing via search alerts and those sorts of things that are AI powered, but the AI can be combing through the database and actually texting on your behalf and engaging with these clients, those who've opted in, right? But the and outreach happening with the AI. The other thing I'll tell you that's been so powerful is, I'll tell you another place that agents sometimes fail, even good, even experienced agents. Um, the way I'll describe it is, look, I've got a sales team, right? And if I ask anyone on my sales team, I'm like, what's your close rate? They're like, dude, it's 50%, 50, 60%. That's my close rate. I'm like, from leads? They're like, well, I mean, good leads, good conversations. Have you ever heard that from an agent? What's your close rate? They're like 50%, 60%, 100%. I mean, 100%. Well, from a qualified person. I'm like, that's not called a close rate. That's called like your favorite metric that you just made up. Um, right? Like the they like to qualify. Um, and so when we're talking about gaps, the other gap is, I actually, where I see personally, where I've seen the most gaps in my interactions with agents. I've worked with agents on a lot of transactions. I will text them or email them high intent buying questions, and they might respond once, but because I didn't say here's the offer, they will drop it, and that will never become what we call an opportunity. That's what we're talking about, is we're talking about lead or contact to opportunity to close. And that's where another big gap is. And that's why we have this folio solution, this that lives in your email inbox and turns that conversation into an opportunity that you can track. And so I would say those two spots, The capture to the conversation to the commit or an opportunity are the two biggest gaps in real estate. And when you combine some of what this AI can do together with Stephenie and Ron, what you guys are talking about qualitatively, where you're training people to be able to have this much better conversation and to tackle hard topics, you double or triple the outcomes. You get double or triple the number of deals in the pipeline and through the pipeline. It's magnificent. I mean, it's been awesome to see.
Yeah. Joe, I agree with you. And what's funny as you're sitting here, it reminds me of the movie Moneyball, where statistics looked at from a computer, from a program. It wasn't AI back then, but it was a somebody wrote the program, all of a sudden changed the entire game of baseball and how you drafted, or in our words, how we select, who you're looking at, how you go about your business. And whether you like it or not, baseball's never been the same since we added what we'll call AI to it to say what is the value of this player.
Totally.
So
Yep. 100%. Well, and that's what the truth is. You've heard it. You can't hit 100% of the shots you never take. You can't, right? It is an equation. So Stephenie, you went back and said, look, I'm just talking to people about getting leads in the database.
Yeah, the way that we kind of talked about it is that that's basically step 1A of infinity number of steps, right? Depending on
Yeah.
how deep you want to go. But you can't do any of the steps or have any of the positive results if you don't start there. And it is the most basic of steps. And I'll tell you, it hasn't changed. We have so many ways to help our Gold Nation agents with getting their database into the system. So we removed that challenge, right? Facing agents that I don't know how to get my database in. Okay, great. We can do that for you. We have a plan for that so that you can get on with the fun stuff and you can start actually having those conversations and going in and looking and seeing your vital scores and seeing those numbers go up and your close rate based on leads and opportunities that come through your database because you've done that initial work. But if you don't do that step, you never get to the other steps. But I think it's critically important too to remember that just because you do that one step and even some of the others, you're not necessarily going to have those results the next day.
We talked about the funnel. We talked about kind of some of the things that you guys are doing with Gold Nation. And importantly, we talked about doubling business in 2026. And what I love is you're not talking about people having to just change everything about their business. You're like, hey, start with the fundamentals. Start with loading your database and getting it in, right? And I love to say, look, you're going to have to, if you want to make a big change happen in your business, you're going to have to break one or two things. You don't break everything, but you gotta break it in order to make it a little bit. And you're talking about something that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, Stephenie. You're like, load the freaking database, let's get going, right? And Ron, you had a good quote or two. I don't know if you still have that handy, but you had a good quote or two. I was like, this is phenomenal.
yeah, um, you know, it's you don't like if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance a lot less. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
I
like
mean,
that one.
we kick against change, but then when we're irrelevant, I mean, it's just so true. I got another thing, too, Joe. When we ask, when you go out and you make change, it's difficult, and I don't speak lightly of it because even a small change or a small tweak in a business is very difficult. Um, but progress, this is another quote, progress involves risk, and you can't steal second base if you keep your foot on first. And many, many times you have to abandon some things. You have to make change. You have to just do it a little bit different. And you can't say, I'm gonna embarrassingly tell you that when text messaging came out, I refused to add text to my call plan for well over a year because I looked at it this way. I said, you can contact me, you leave a message on my work phone. because we had work phones on our
Yeah,
desk.
yeah, yeah.
You leave a message on my cell phone, then you email me. Why do you need to text me? Okay. And I held that position for quite a while,
Yeah.
probably a year. I never learned how to text with the ABC codes like my kids did, because by the time I was texting, we were already using keyboards. So, so uh, and I learned from that. I learned from that to say, you know what, you've got to be quicker to change. You can't just say because it's uncomfortable for me or I don't want to, it's not going to change. Imagine now where I'd be if I still said, I'm never going to accept a text message.
You got
Then
there
I would say
eventually. You got there eventually.
75, 80% of my opportunities would go away
Yeah,
because
yeah,
nobody's going to call me to say, hey, would you like to get together for this? You send a text, say, hey, do you have time to meet up today?
yeah. I love that. Great quotes, great words of wisdom. What we're going to encourage people to do coming out of this is we're going to say, look, gear up for a big doubling year. It's absolutely the kind of market where you should do that. You should be able to go double or triple your business actually this next year. But in order to do it, you're going to have to start now with a couple of enabling kind of changes in your business, how you approach it. Start with getting your database in that place. Start then by enabling with AI. And then, Stephenie, loved your points about how to qualitatively change those conversations. Fantastic, guys. Well, Ron, Stephenie, thanks so much. Appreciate the time spent. Words of wisdom. Love it.
Thank you, Joe. Been a lot of fun.